We are gathered here to celebrate 50 years and to celebrate the fruits of those early pioneers who came to East Africa to bring the faith. And what you see here today is the harvest of those pioneers who came and also those early believers who accepted the faith of Baha'u'llah. Because now we are celebrating fruits of other people, we should work very hard so that our children could also celebrate in the future 50 years of our own fruits.
It gladdened our hearts immensely to hear of the high spirit and confident outlook marking the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the cause of Baha'u'llah in Kenya. In coming together at a gathering so widely representative of your community, you demonstrate beyond words how sacrificial have been the efforts and how heroic in the deeds that have laid to an unassailable foundation of the divine system as now exists in your promising land. May the dear members of your community in all regions preserve with unflinching resolve to advance the major aim of the 5-year plan, that they may reach heights of success as yet unattained, will be the object of our ardent supplications at the holy threshold on behalf of each and all of them. The Universal House of Justice.
Well done for having brought the faith up to such standards, and we greatly rejoice in having the capable Kenya community as our neighbor, no better as a vibrant community of our true brothers and sisters. With such bonds of love and such capacity between us, could we not be exemplary as a region and be a great bright light of the love of Baha'u'llah that illumines the whole of the African continent in the course of the next 50 years ahead? Loving Baha'i greetings, National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Uganda.
Nimesimama hapa kukaribisha wageni wetu, na wageni wetu ni early believers. I'm standing here to welcome our early believers, and our early believers are our visitors.
I'll speak with power because I know Baha'u'llah protect us as the present world God's manifestation. So this song we're going to sing, loved by Ahmadullah Kanam, because it says Baha'u'llah has come to unite all the four corners of the world in a Luya language. She was dancing. Now, even when I was in Haifa, she asked me to sing in her house, the house of Abdullah. Havana, Batamu, 3, 4. Havana, Batamu, Havana, Batamu,
We wish to extend our warm welcome to Mr. Ali Nakhjavani and Mrs. Violet Nakhjavani, who are our guests of honor at this conference.
Beloved friends, I really don't know how to express my excitement, coupled with my gratitude that Baha'u'llah enabled Violette and me to come here and to be in your presence.
This tour of Africa was the joy of her life, that I think forever you will be proud that you are part of the continent who gave so much joy to her heart. And I know she is with us today. I have felt her very strongly here, and I'm sure many of you who knew her personally and had her in your homes, you have been host and hostess to her in different parts of Africa. You must feel the same. Thank you.
I'm going to tell you one important thing. Do you know Baha'u'llah, he came to the bank of Africa, leading to go to the most worst prison, Akka. He stepped on the soil of Africa and said, oh God, bless this continent. Now friends, you being the Africans, are you going to sleep? And the messenger of God himself poured the water of the Spirit of God for the continent of Africa. Wake up.
Arudi Uriana, Arudi Uriana, Arudi Uriana, Arudi Uriana, Arudi Uriana, Arudi Uriana, Sibendi Uriana, Sibendi Uriana, Sibendi Uriana, Sibendi Uriana, Sibendi Uriana, Sibendi Uriana,
The late hand of the cause of God, Musa Banani, the spiritual conqueror of Africa, ignited the candle on behalf of the Universal House of Justice, witnessed the election of the first national spiritual assemblies of the Baha'is of Kenya in 1964. The late hand of the cause of God, Enoch Olenga, father of victories, stayed in Kenya,
developing the young national spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Kenya. The late hand of the cause of God, Amatul Baha, Ruhia Hanum, witnessed laid cornerstones of several Haziratul Quds, Nairobi and Namawanga during the 10-year Crusade. God's Spirit through Uganda had come to Kenya.
It is a joyful time. It is a joyful time. A time to reflect on wonderful deeds that these wonderful souls did for us. Wonderful deeds that these wonderful souls did for us.
Asani saburi, isobel saburi, set examples
To be followed by Baha'is everywhere.
ayo.
To be followed by Baha'is everywhere.
The Shoghi Effendi launched the 10-year Crusade. Now, under the 10-year Crusade, he had virgin territories, as he called them. And then he called for pioneers to arise. And he said, whoever arises and goes to these virgin territories will become a knight of Baha'u'llah. And then, believe it or not, in a continent which had just begun to be opened, only 2 years before that, just 2 years before that, the entire Baha'i world had been in existence all these decades. From Africa itself, 10 African Baha'is arose. Among them was Enoch Olinga, and became Knights of Baha'u'llah. They arose from Africa to go to African virgin territories. I cannot tell you how pleased Shoghi Effendi was. When you read the letters of Shoghi Effendi of the period, how pleased he was, how grateful he was, how appreciative he was, that these new Baha'is from Africa have arisen, 10 of them, in different parts of Africa arose.
Tell, Duarte Vieira, kindly tell. What crime won you a prison cell? Your testament a biscuit tin? What, Duarte Vieira, was your sin? What was the error of your ways, that heaven's comfort sings your praise? What offense did you commit? Tell, so that we may follow it.
So, reaching the Baha'i center, this Baha'i was known as Abriwemela. We got in, and as we got in, before we got in, he pressed a bell outside, just a bell, and it rang inside. And then I heard footsteps coming. Kaka, kaka. This was a lady, you know. Kaka, kaka. She opened the door, and she was Mary Colson. Now, you know, she saw my friend Agri Mela. Hello, Agri, hello. And I was just looking, what is this? Hello, Agri. And then she embraced Agri. She greeted Agri with such a love. I had never seen even my Catholic father, you know, the priest, doing that. And then Agri introduced me to her. This is Mr. Bonaventure Wafula. Oh, Bonaventure, how are you? You know, she also embraced me. I was just shivering. This is such a love. I'm telling you, it was shocking. And then, as we sat down, we got seated. She said, Wafula, Agri, what do you take? I have here passion fruit. And orange, passion squash and orange squash. What do you take? Then Agri said, any. Then she gave orange squash in a glass. What about Wafula? You know, I was shivering. Because my first time, even my priest, home priest, never gave me that kind of thing. I was shivering. So Wafula, feel at home. And then I was also given an, I drank. Wonderful. And this really attracted me. Yeah, and when we wanted, I whispered to Agure, why don't we go? And say, okay. But then Agure spoke to them, to the Goldsons. Before that, Rex came, it was Mary who came first. Rex also came and embraced us. And now we got seated with the both of them. Now, they told us it was nearing lunch hour. They say, no, why don't you wait for lunch? It's just being prepared quickly and before you go. Now, I thought maybe when this lunch is prepared, maybe we will be given lunch in the servants' quarters. On the table, I'm telling you. And then the lunch came, it was put on the table for the first time for me to have food with, this is, I'm telling you.
What Baha'u'llah said about the black race. The words of Baha'u'llah about the black race, and I'm so glad to see the overwhelming majority of our audience belongs to this race. They are, he stated, like the pupil of the eye, through which the light of the Spirit shines. What does the pupil of the eye do? The pupil of the eye does two things. It sees and it imparts. It sees what is before it. And that's how we see, I see you, you see me. Through the pupil of your eye. This is one function. And the second function is that each one of us has a soul, a spirit. This spirit finds expression through the eye, through the pupil of the eye. And Baha'u'llah says that the spirit reflects itself or projects itself through that pupil to others. This is why when we look at a certain person, we say, he has very kind eyes. Or to opposite, he has very unkind eyes. I have gleaned for you some of the adjectives and attributes that Shoghi Effendi has actually used in describing the spirit animating the African believers of his period. They possess a most exemplary spirit of devotion and loyalty. Their spirit is very touching and very noble. Friends, this is about you, those of you who belong to this race. It's not about us. No. They possess patience and a great capacity for faith. They have a contribution to make to the world order of Baha'u'llah. And then look at this short paragraph. Africa is slowly awakening and finding herself, and she undoubtedly has a great message to give and a great contribution to make to the advancement of world civilization. To the degree to which her peoples accept Baha'u'llah, will they be blessed, strengthened, and protected. These are profound words. These are heavenly sentences that Shoghi Effendi has written about you. I would like to ask you, just for about half a minute, I will stop talking, and I would like to ask the African friends here, during this brief moment, this brief pause of silence, to turn their hearts to Baha'u'llah and ask Baha'u'llah to make you one of these souls that Shoghi Effendi is describing here, so that you will spend the rest of your lives following these standards that he has set before us. We will pause now.
These wonderful souls dedicated the prime time of their lives to this beloved cause and traveled thousands of miles from their homes coming this far because of their love for mankind. Now we can rejoice with everybody over the victories won in Baha''s name. And after this occasion of rejoicing together, we can now truly visualize that the future harvest will be so rich, the fruits so pure, and the activities so glorious. Allahu Akbar.
For more victories in Baha''s name. For more victories in Baha''s name.
Wonderful service
that these wonderful souls did for us.
Wonderful service
that these wonderful souls did for us.
I remember when we were in Ethiopia, and particularly in Asmara, in Eritrea, there was such a spirit of harmony and love amongst the pioneers and the local believers. There was such a love, I have never seen it anywhere else. She was 5 days in Asmara, and I think she gave 5 of her finest talks in Africa there. She was so inspired. She just glowed. And her talks were fantastic. Some of these I have put in my book because they are such beautiful talks. When we came out of Ethiopia, she often thought and said, I wonder what it was in that country that brought the best out of me. And then she came to the conclusion that what inspired her in Ethiopia, and particularly in Asmara, was this harmony in the community, this love and unity of the friends that affected her and brought the best out of her. She had the complete reverse of it in another country in Africa, which was a small, very small community with 2 dear families, pioneers there, who did not like each other. And it wasn't just that not like each other, they really disliked each other. And every time one of them was with Ruhi Khanum, somehow they would start talking something about the other one. We were 3 days in that town, and Ruhi Khanum went to bed with a high fever, and there was nothing wrong with her physically. She just went to bed with fever. And she came to the conclusion that this was the effect of the inharmony amongst the friends. And she often cited this. And she said, inharmony is a disease, not a psychological disease, it's a physical disease. Said if you look at the body, your own body, we are healthy when there is harmony within our own body. The moment there is something wrong, this harmony is disturbed, the body gets sick. And she believed very strongly, and she often mentioned it, that don't think that if you are in the daggers, whatever you say, edge with each other, that it's just between you and a friend. It is not. The effect of it would be on the community. The effect of it sometimes go as far as the whole country. And that this was a lesson that really we all learned from her. She believed that love is like a fountain. He said the more you open the faucet, the more water will come out. You cannot limit your love because love is limitless. You open your heart to everybody and you will find that you can take even people that are quite different from you and you have disliked them in the first place. You can take them into your heart because you have opened the doors wide open.
For he is able. Yes, God is able. And as the light gives way to dawning and evaporates away, we all stand to face another day.
We cannot have a unified, vibrant Kenyan Baha'i community if we are conscious about tribes. The House of Justice has written a letter to the Baha'is of Africa, warning the Baha'is of Africa against the danger of tribalism. Tribalism brings division. If it exists in the society, gradually we hope it will disappear, but certainly it should not exist in our community. I should forget to which tribe I belong or to which tribe my friend belongs. If I'm conscious of it, if I'm thinking of it, then it becomes a form of prejudice. Baha'u'llah has come to abolish all forms of prejudice. White, black, again, tribal prejudice is part of it. So we should try very hard, and I think through prayer and through consciousness, conscious effort, we will be able to overcome this.
All people of the world, open your spiritual eyes. Both women and men have been created in the image of God. There is no difference between them. Whosoever draweth nearer to God, that one is the most favored.
Now, Shoghi Effendi has warned us against materialism in Africa. Now, materialism is something which is the opposite of sacrificing for the fun. Materialism says, try to have more and get more and keep more. That's what materialism does. And Shoghi Effendi, sitting in Haifa and looking into the future about Africa, saw a danger. And he said, materialism is on its way to Africa. Detachment is the exact opposite of materialism. Detachment makes you aware of the things of the spirit. Detachment makes you responsible to God, makes you aware that you are responsible to God. It makes us aware that this life is not everything, that this life is but a stage in our existence.
Power to religion. Down with science. Power to science.
Down with religion.
Did you say knowledge of all kinds? Ha ha ha. You walk but you are blind. For science prevents you from reaching God, the source of all knowledge.
Survival for the fittest. Mother Nature mechanism for purification. For only the best must survive.
Is mind but flesh and bone? Is instinct his only driving force? For his destiny man controls. For a higher purpose was he created. Man is not a beast of the field to compete needlessly for the things of the earth. Power to science and power to religion.
Shoghi Effendi, in one of his letters, written in his own handwriting, he speaks about this opposition, but he says, what will the opposition result in? What will be the outcome of opposition in Africa? He says, every attack, however launched, whether individually or collectively, against the budding institutions of a slowly rising, majestically unfolding order, is not only doomed to fail, but is bound to bring in its wake a further reinforcement of the numerical strength of the followers of the faith, and a still more notable acceleration in the progress of its expansion and consolidation. This is the result of opposition. He says this opposition will fail. The only result is it's a proclamation of the cause. More people will enter the Baha'i fold, and the process of expansion and consolidation will be strengthened. This is how the Son of God saw. Before he passed away, in 1957, he wrote this, the last year of his life. He saw this was going to happen in Africa. We should be ready for it. We read in the writings that God can change an atom into a sun. God can change a drop into an ocean. God can change a gnat. The word gnat is written G-N-A-T, and it means mosquito. He can change a gnat into an eagle. We may think this is an exaggeration. My dear friends, I can assure you, this is not an exaggeration. In my own life, I have seen many drops becoming oceans. I have seen mosquitoes becoming eagles under the influence of the cause of Baha'u'llah. What we have to do is to cling to the hem of his robe all the time, to be with him. He will be with us, and he will show us that he is with us. He will confirm us. He will protect us. He will strengthen us. He will guide us, and he will lead us to many high victories under his glorious name. When Violette and I will go back to the Holy Land, you can be sure that in addition to the loving prayers of the Universal House of Justice that you just heard about, that when we go back, we're going to remember you. We're going to remember these meetings here. We're going to remember your shining faces here. And we will be praying for you and for the Kenya Baha'i community and for the National Spiritual Assembly of Kenya and for the counselors laboring in this country and for the auxiliary board members and assistants laboring in this country. We will be praying for the entire Baha'i community of Kenya. You can be sure about that.
Muko na hiyo? Those who don't have, you can envy me for about a minute. I think I'll be making copies, so you'll be able to come and buy copies from me, eh?
Sisi Yazidi, Soraya Yazidi, set examples
to be followed by Baha'is everywhere. To be followed by Baha'is everywhere.
Wonderful service
that these wonderful souls did for us.
Wonderful service
that these wonderful souls did for us.
I think more important than what I have to say is a message which has just come from Haifa, from the Universal House of Justice. Just handed a copy, and I request Mr. Obura to come forward and to read the message for us.
From the Baha'i World Center, participants in the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the faith in Kenya. It is dated 19th Sunday, and the message arrived at 1:06 p.m. Just this afternoon. Subject: 50th anniversary celebrations. To participants in the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the faith in Kenya. Message: it gladdened our hearts immensely to hear of the high spirit and confident outlook marking the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the cause of Baha'u'llah in Kenya. In coming together at a gathering so widely representative of your community, you demonstrate beyond words how sacrificial have been the efforts and how heroic in the deeds that have laid to an unassailable foundation of the divine system as now exists in your promising land. Drawing strength from Kenya's record of significant achievements and with complete trust in the unceasing confirmations of the Lord of hosts, may the dear members of your community in all regions preserve with unflinching resolve to advance the major aim of the 5-year plan, that they may reach heights of success as yet unattained, will be the object of our ardent supplications at the holy threshold on behalf of each and all of them. The Universal House of Justice.
When the Universal House of Justice writes in its messages that they will be praying, they actually do so when they go to the holy shrines and they have a list of names of institutions as well as of individuals or communities, and they actually read those names in the sacred shrines. So when they have promised that they will do so, you can be sure that the name of your National Assembly and your beloved community will be remembered in the holy shrines. Walls of that holy shrine have heard the names many, many times of Kenya and of East Africa. Beloved friends, I really don't know how to express my excitement, coupled with my gratitude that Baha'u'llah enabled Jalette and me to come here and to be in your presence. I really feel very humble as I look at you, your radiant faces. And as I sat here and heard speaker after speaker and singer after singer mention our names, my humility and humbleness even increased, because I looked at myself and I see, who am I? I haven't done anything, you know. So I really feel in the presence of the Blessed Beauty totally unworthy. And I have only prayed as you were singing and mentioning our names. I was only praying that Baha'u'llah will bestow upon us at this late stage in our life more of his confirmations and blessings, so that we may continue to pursue the path of service in his love. You know, it is 40 years that I have left Africa. And during this period, I came only for the funeral of Mr. Benani in Uganda. But as far as residence was concerned, it's 40 years I haven't been really residing in Africa. And the period I spent in East Africa was only 10 years. Now, when I hear of the number of years that some of the early pioneers have spent here, when I hear of the number of years that the early believers have labored and sacrificed all this period, I am ashamed of myself. Truly, that's how I feel. During these 40 years, Africa has suddenly awakened. When we compare what Africa was in 1961, when I left, for example, and what it is now in 2001, you have achieved a great deal. I'm talking about the entire continent. I tried to get some statistics to show you what I mean. For example, in Africa 40 years ago, we had only 4 national spiritual assemblies. Now we have 45 national assemblies. In 1961, throughout the entire continent, there were 800 local spiritual assemblies, roughly. Now there are 4,750 local spiritual assemblies. That shows you the extent of the expansion of the faith on this continent. Again, 40 years ago, Baha'i literature was translated and published in 150 languages. But now it is in 2,700 African vernacular languages. Again, here we have clear evidence of how the faith has grown. Now, in taking Kenya as a separate country, from what I've been able to gather, and this is by no means definite. It has to be checked in the files and records of the period. But my rough estimate shows that there were about 10 local spiritual assemblies at that time in Kenya. And now there are 580 local assemblies. There were at the time approximately 1,000 believers throughout the entire country. And today you have something between 140,000 and 150,000 believers. So there is cause to praise the Lord for your efforts and the efforts of those who came before you and those who are now supporting you and are with you. This is the way that the faith has grown. We should thank Baha'u'llah for this progress. Just to give you a very brief, quick survey about what happened in Africa. To start with, as was said this morning, steamer of Baha'u'llah taking him to the Holy Land as an exile, docked in Alexandria. Alexandria is, of course, part of the African continent, in Egypt. But before Baha'u'llah arrived with his ship there, 2 years before that, he sent 2 Persian Baha'is to go, when he was in Adrianople, to go to Cairo and settle there. So he was already thinking of the African continent in the year 1866. That was the time when these 2 dear Baha'is from Kashan settled. Now, I don't want to go into the history of what happened after that, the number of Baha'is, of Baha'i teachers who went to Egypt at that time at the express wish of Baha'u'llah himself. And then, most importantly, is what Baha'u'llah said about the black race. And these are the words of Baha'u'llah about the black race, and I'm so glad to see the overwhelming majority of our audience belongs to this race. They are, he stated, like the pupil of the eye, through which the light of the Spirit shines. In his other writings, Baha'u'llah has likened the world to the human body. Just as the human body has different organs and limbs and parts, different parts, likewise, the world is like that, through its races, its nations, its tribes, etc. We all, this is the entire human family, is like a human body. This is what Baha'u'llah says. And he likens the prophets and the messengers to divine physicians who come and look at this human temple, which is humanity, and prescribe the medicine as needed. Now, in this human body, he has picked the eye, the pupil of the eye, which is black. And he's telling us, he's telling the world, he's teaching the world that this pupil is the black race. This really calls for reflection on the part of all of us to see what Baha'u'llah is saying. Do we believe what he is saying? What does the pupil of the eye do? The pupil of the eye does two things. It sees and it imparts. It sees what is before it. And that's how we see, I see you, you see me. Through the pupil of your eye. This is one function. And the second function is that each one of us has a soul, a spirit. This spirit finds expression through the eye, through the pupil of the eye. And Baha'u'llah says that the spirit reflects itself or projects itself through that pupil to others. This is why when we look at a certain person, we say, he has very kind eyes. Or the opposite, he has very unkind eyes. You see, we feel the purity of the soul of the person by looking into his or her eyes. That is an important thing. And this is what Baha'u'llah, the founder of our faith, is teaching not only us, he's telling the world how to look upon the black race. Then in his writings, he says, the message that I have brought from the Lord is not destined for any special group of people. It is for the whole world. It's not only for Iran, for example. It's not for the East. It's not for the West. It is for the entire planet. And he makes that very clear in his writings. He also clearly says how much I long to proclaim the faith of God to every spot on earth. That was his longing. And what the Baha'is of the world are now doing is bringing into reality what was the deep desire of Baha'u'llah. I will come to this later when we discuss the 5-year plan. After Baha'u'llah comes Abdul Baha. And what does Abdul Baha do? He keeps, every time there is a new black Baha'i in America, in North America, he writes a beautiful tablet and he quotes Baha'u'llah about the pupil of the eye. That's one thing he does. And then just at the turn of the century, I'm talking about the 20th century, of course. In the year 1900, we're trying to determine the exact date. It's either 1900 or 1901. Baha'u'llah revealed a tablet in which he speaks about the progress of the cause, the spread of the cause on the African continent. And then when he himself went to the United States and was in contact with hundreds and thousands of black people in North America, how much he showered love upon them and how much he praised them. And there are so many stories of Abdul Baha in North America that undoubtedly you have read. Now, when the time for Shoghi Effendi came, the first thing he explained to all of us was that this was not the time for Abdul Baha's wish to be fulfilled about Africa. The time was now to build the administrative order. And he kept the divine plan in abeyance until he was able to raise the administrative order of Baha'u'llah worldwide. And this took some time. And then, exactly 50 years after what the wish of Abdul Baha in his tablet, he sent his messages to East and West, saying, this, the time for Africa, the hour for Africa has struck. Pioneers now must arise. 50 years had passed. And now, from the date when he raised that call till today, we have another, another 50 years. In other words, it is both the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the faith in Africa under the 2-year plan of Shoghi Effendi, and it is also the 100th anniversary of the expression of Abdul Baha's will about the future of Africa. After the 2-year plan, of which a lot has been already said, then Shoghi Effendi launched the 10-year crusade. Now, under the 10-year crusade, he had virgin territories, as he called them. I am particularly referring to these virgin territories because I want to talk about later, I want to talk about clusters. So please follow me. I know we have had a good lunch and sometimes we are half asleep or dozing off, and my voice is a little monotonous, so it's good music for you to doze off. He had 230 virgin territories. If you take it in terms of today, in any given country, 230, if you like, clusters, virgin clusters. And then he called for pioneers to arise. And he said, whoever arises and goes to these virgin territories will become a knight of Baha'u'llah. And then, believe it or not, in a continent which had just begun to be opened, only 2 years before that, just 2 years before that, the entire Baha'i world had been in existence all these decades. But Africa, just 2 years of its life, spiritual life, from Africa itself, 10 African Baha'is arose. Among them was Enoch Olinga, and became Knights of Baha'u'llah. They arose from Africa to go to African virgin territories. I cannot tell you how pleased Shoghi Effendi was. When you read the letters of Shoghi Effendi of the period, how pleased he was, how grateful he was, how appreciative he was, that these new Baha'is from Africa have arisen, 10 of them, in different parts of Africa arose and became Knights of Baha'u'llah. And then from North America, from the United States, 7 black Americans arose also and became Knights, and 1 from Jamaica, making 8. So in all, 18 black Baha'is became Knights of Baha'u'llah under the guardianship. You see, Shoghi Effendi, if you read his letters, you see that during the last years of his life, Africa was a source of joy and pride to him. Thank you very much. He would talk to the pilgrims about Africa. He would talk to the pilgrims about the pioneers of Africa. He would talk to the pilgrims about the believers in Africa. He would write letters he would answer letters from African friends who had written to him. He would respond. He would write letters about the African Baha'is to many Baha'is throughout the world, to many national assemblies. I have gleaned for you some of the adjectives and attributes that Shoghi Effendi has actually used in describing the spirit animating the African believers of his period and describing their spiritual capacities. For example, he says they are innocent in heart. Again, they are pure-hearted. They are spiritually receptive. They possess a most exemplary spirit of devotion and loyalty. Their spirit is very touching and very noble. Friends, this is about you, those of you who belong to this race. It's not about us. No. I repeat this last one. Their spirit is very touching, very noble. They possess patience and a great capacity for faith. And then he also wrote this through his secretary. They have a contribution to make to the world order of Baha'u'llah. And then look at this short paragraph. Africa is slowly awakening and finding herself, and she undoubtedly has a great message to give and a great contribution to make to the advancement of world civilization. To the degree to which her peoples accept Baha'u'llah, will they be blessed, strengthened, and protected. These are profound words. These are heavenly sentences that Shoghi Effendi has written about you. Before I continue, I would like to ask you just for about half a minute. I will stop talking. And I would like to ask the African friends here, during this brief moment, this brief pause of silence, to turn their hearts to Baha'u'llah and ask Baha'u'llah to make you one of these souls that Shoghi Effendi is describing here, so that you will spend the rest of your lives following these standards that he has set before us. We will pause now. I think that such qualities and attributes that Shoghi Effendi has included in his messages about Africa, I can assure you I have read a great deal the writings of Shoghi Effendi, because I used to work in the Holy Land for the research department. And I used to go over all these letters myself, together with many other friends. And I could probably tell you that I have probably read every single letter that Shoghi Effendi, a copy of which has been sent to Haifa, that he wrote about Africa and the African people and the African Baha'is. And I have also read other things from Shoghi Effendi. And I can assure you, friends, that I, for one, have not seen the pen of Shoghi Effendi, the mind of Shoghi Effendi, express itself in such terms about any other race. I'd like to say a few words about prayer. Each one of us, in this short pause, turn in prayer to Baha'u'llah. I'd like to explain to you what I understand of prayer. Because when we came to Africa, I was very struck myself, as one of the pioneers, by the attitude of humble supplication and concentration of thought that I saw in the African people. As a general rule, the African people, I think, have a capacity to pray, to communicate with the Lord. They have that capacity more than other races. And that was one of the things that struck me as one of the pioneers about this wonderful grace. Okay, now this prayer, when we read the writings, we see one type of prayer referred to by Baha'u'llah are the obligatory prayers. Now the obligatory prayers, we have them in English and we have them in Swahili. We hope to have them in many of the vernacular languages as well. But they are there in Swahili. And we are called upon by Baha'u'llah from age 15 till age 70 as a requirement, as a spiritual obligation, to choose one of these three obligatory prayers and perform it once every day, whatever, once, or sometimes it is 3 times, sometimes it's once, and so on. Whatever the instructions are accompanying that obligatory prayer. This is an obligation. We have to do it. And personally, my recommendation is that these obligatory prayers should be memorized. You can't take, for example, if you want to have the long obligatory prayer, you can't have the book in your hand and kneel down and prostrate yourself and sit. And these movements called for in the obligatory prayer can only be performed in a dignified way and in a proper way if we memorize these prayers. They become part and parcel of our souls. They will be with us for all time. This is one of the fundamental things that I think we should do as Baha'is. So this is one form of prayer. Second is what we have in the prayer books. For different occasions, we have prayers for healing, we have prayers for children, we have prayers for mothers, for fathers, we have prayers for traveling, we have prayers for other different needs and occasions. These are the prayers. We have prayers for meetings, and so on and so forth. This is second type. Now, when reading this second type of prayers, I have noticed something also very beautiful in Africa. And I always hoped that this would exist elsewhere in the world. And it is this, that prayer needs a little bit of preparation of the soul. So, what is the best way to pray? To one of these prayers. And I have noticed it even during the last 2 days here in this hall. The person reading the prayer comes, he doesn't immediately start and read. No, there is a little pause. This is to prepare the soul, you know. See what Abdul Baha and Baha'u'llah and Shoghi Effendi have done in the holy shrines. There are gardens surrounding the shrines. There are gardens even surrounding the temples. Before we go in, we have to walk through the garden. This is preparation. Before having the obligatory prayer, what do? We have ablutions. This is preparation. We have to prepare the soul. So then you have the prayer. And then after the prayer, what happens? You close the book and you walk away? Or you close the book and you start coughing and moving and going this way or that way? No. I don't know how many of you noticed, quite a number of those who offered prayers here, offered the prayers and then just waited for a little while, paused for a little while. This is proper. They do this instinctively here. They do it as if it's part of the culture, and it's correct. That's how it should be. Now, when one is in a meeting, that's the only thing we can do. We can't have half an hour of pause and meditation and things like that. But when I am at home, when I am alone, and I read a prayer, I read the tablet of Ahmad, for example, or I have a healing prayer for somebody, or for myself, or whatever it is, then I must have a period of meditation, of reflection, of silence within my soul. And what do I do? What do I say? I have my own conversation with God, with Baha'u'llah. The prescribed prayer I read, and I use it as a ladder to detach myself from my surroundings. But then when I finish this, then I have my own chat with my Lord. What do I say? I'm telling you what I do. It doesn't mean you have to do it. I'm telling you my understanding of the meaning of Baha'i prayer. That's what I am sharing with you. I think it is appropriate to tell Baha'u'llah that we are weak, that we are needy, that we are ignorant, that we have shortcomings, that we have imperfections, that we realize that we have transgressed. We have to become aware of our weaknesses, acknowledge our weaknesses. No one, friends, no one can ever say he or she is perfect. There is no such thing. We are humans. We are human mortals. We have made mistakes. We make mistakes. And I'm sorry to say we will continue to make mistakes. That's because we are human. In the writings we read, the only perfect exemplar is Abdul Baha. That's it. Shoghi Effendi, the sign of God, writes very clearly that he is not a perfect exemplar of the teachings of Baha'u'llah. The sign of God. He says there is only one, and that was Abdul Baha. Then who, excuse me, who are you? Who am I? Of course we make mistakes. We should find our mistakes. Sometimes we forget them. We are ready to forgive ourselves very quickly. But we never, I don't say never, it takes us a long time to forgive others. But we have to look for our own faults. And believe me, we have, every one of us has quite a number of them. And that is the time, during that moment of reflection, that we should communicate with him and have a chat with him in our own language. You know, there was a time when there were articles, I don't know, some of you may be too young to remember these things, in newspapers in the West. God is dead. There were many such articles. And Mr. William Sears, Hand of the Cause of God, had a sense of humor. Some of you may have met him. He was giving one day a public talk in Europe, and during the question period, someone said, "We hear God is dead. What do you think?" Mr. Sears thought a little. He said, "You know, this morning when I was having a chat with him, he sounded to be fine." And Mr. Sears did have a chat with Baha'u'llah. Yes, it's a good thing to have a chat with God. Yes, that's what we should do more and more. And acknowledge our weaknesses and ask for forgiveness. And let us also ask for forgiveness for others. Let us, more importantly, forgive others ourselves. I have seen at least 2 tablets in which Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha clearly states that our sins will not be forgiven if we do not forgive the sins of others. It's very clear. So this is the time for me to get rid of this load which is burdening me, because I have a grudge against this person, I have a dislike against that person. Maybe I'm jealous of yet another person. And I think they are jealous of me, whereas the real fact is that I'm jealous of them. Let me get rid of this load. Let me learn how to forgive. Let me learn how to lighten my burden, my load. And then ask for forgiveness for my own sins, my own transgressions, and beg Baha'u'llah to assist me so that I don't repeat those sins. Now, this, I think, is what I'm trying to say, that there are 3 types of prayer. The obligatory prayers, the prayers for special occasions and so on, and then this prayer which is inside, which is private. Speaking about this private conversation with God, there is a tablet from Abdul Baha in which he says, most of the time I am in a prayerful attitude. What does that mean? Most of the time, Abdul Baha, our perfect exemplar, says, I'm in a prayerful attitude. Now, what was he doing? He was meeting people. He was visiting homes. He was delivering talks and speeches. He was going to see government officials. He was reading letters that were coming in to him from different parts of the world. Whatever he was doing, he says, most of the time I'm in a prayerful attitude. It's a beautiful thing to try and emulate, follow the example of Abdul Baha. Blessed are we if we could only be in this mood, in this condition of being aware of the presence of God, realizing that we are in His presence and that we can communicate with Him. I think you can do that while you're doing something else. This inner adjustment of the soul towards the kingdom. That is the thing that Abdul Baha is trying to describe, in my view. And I think that's what he's telling us to do also. Because he says, be like me, follow me. He wants us to follow his example. Baha'u'llah produced Abdul Baha for us as an example, as a pattern to follow, a model to follow. And blessed are they who can do this. You can do it. You're listening to me now. You can be in a prayerful mood. Right now, you can be in a prayerful mood. We don't need to have a pause of half a minute to do that. You can do it because you feel His presence. He says, I am ever present. He says, I'm all seeing. I'm all hearing. I'm all knowing. This is the God in whom we believe. Let us be with Him. He says, love me that I may love thee. Let's always love Him so that He will be with us. There is another statement which is like that in the writings. He says, be thou with God, and thou shalt see that He is with thee. Let me open up this sentence, okay? He says, be with God, and God will be with you. This is one simple way of saying it. But it's not only that. It is this plus. Be with God, He will be with you, and He will show you that He is with you. This is what it means. It means that He will show you out of His bounty, out of His grace. He will show you that He's with you. You're not alone. He shows that to you. You see His signs. You recognize His signs. You see as if He's pushing you in a certain direction. It is as if you're going in one direction and it's the wrong direction. He's pushing you another direction, towards another people, another door, another direction. This you will experience, I am sure, that here in this hall, there are many of you, perhaps every single one of you must have had such an experience. Especially when we arise to serve the cause, we see the operation of His divine invisible hand. We see that. How He operates, how He influences our thoughts, how He guides us, how He confirms us. Are you tired? I'm ready to stop, believe me. Just give me a moment to have some drink. In the meantime, you can meditate. So, in addition to these prayers, what we read in the writings is that we are asked or called upon to read the holy texts twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. This is not from a local spiritual assembly asking you to do that. It is from Baha'u'llah in his most holy book. He says, read the verses in the morning and in the evening. And he who does not do this is not fulfilling the covenant, is not being faithful to the covenant. Now, we cannot take these words lightly. We have to look at ourselves and say, all right, I am a Baha'i, I believe in Baha'u'llah. What am I going to do about this verse that Baha'u'llah is asking me to? Thank you very much. Well, I don't know where we were, I lost. What was I saying? We're talking about reading the words of God every morning and every, right? Okay. You have to remind me because, you know, I'm 82 years old. It's finita la musica. Yeah. Okay. Now, you know, I have known a number of Baha'is who have done what I'm going to explain to you in order to obey this commandment of Baha'u'llah. And I heard it from pilgrims, because I sometimes speak about this subject to the pilgrims. And then quietly they come to me and they tell me, you know, this is what I have done. And I compared notes and I saw a number of them have done exactly the same thing. They have a little notebook, small notebook like that they put in their pocket. Yes? And he says, what I do is I write a sentence that I like from the writings, especially from the hidden words. A short sentence. And I write it in my own handwriting, in my little notebook. I read it in the morning, just one sentence. Baha'u'llah does not say it should be 6 sentences or 7 sentences. He says, read the words. What's wrong with one sentence? Nothing. All right. In the evening, I pick up my notebook again and I look at that again. Next day, the same sentence. Where does it say you cannot repeat the same sentence the next day or the 4th day or the 5th day? It does not exist. He says, read my verses. All right, I'm reading your verses. That's what he did. That's what they do. And he does this again, morning, evening. 3rd day, morning, evening. You know what happens? He has memorized it. It has become part of his soul. Turns the page, another sentence, another hidden word, another small passage that he likes from the writings of Baha'u'llah. He writes it. He does the same thing. Again, he reads it more than once, and over more than 1 or 2 or 3, whatever number of days it takes for him to fully memorize it. You know what happens is that when you have these, you not only memorize it, you are also thinking about it during the day. You know, you meditate about the meaning, the implications of this sentence. What does it really mean? You explore the mysteries of the Word of God. That's what you do. You know, by the end of the month, you already know a number of passages that you did not know before. By the end of the 1st month, by the end of the 2nd month, By the end of the year, you are a professor of Baha'i faith. You know it all by heart. You have a whole catalog of passages that's part of you. No one can take them away from you. You know, I want to tell you something. In Iran, when they took the Baha'is to prison, they took everything away from them and they would put them in solitary cells. No communication with anybody. No books, nothing. All that they had was what they had memorized. That was their companion. That's what they repeated to themselves all the time in that solitary, dark cell. That is what kept them alive, spiritually alive. And if they would meet each other, they had the chance of just meeting each other, they would not talk about different things. They would say, by the way, in the tablet of Ahmad, after that third sentence, I have forgotten one word there. What, do you know what it is? Double check, cross-reference in order to refresh their memories. This is the only thing that kept them. This becomes truly a source of strength, a source of life for you in your daily activities. Another thing is the question of 95 times Allahu Akbar. Please don't forget that. This is again not from one of the local committees who has suggested this to you. It's from Baha'u'llah. He says, repeat Allahu Akbar 95 times every day. Find time, sit quietly, repeat Allahu Akbar 95 times. He is the divine physician. He is giving prescription to you and to me what to do to improve our Baha'i life. These are the things he's telling us to do. Now, about our interaction with each other. Violette spoke to us this morning about unity and the fact that harmony even improves physical health, and disunity detracts from physical health and causes even illness. Now, I'm not going to discuss this aspect because I think Violette expressed it very well. But there is one aspect of unity that I must mention here, because it is in one of the letters of the House of Justice. My dear friends, we cannot have a unified, vibrant Kenyan Baha'i community if we are conscious about tribes. The House of Justice has written a letter to the Baha'is of Africa, warning the Baha'is of Africa against the danger of tribalism. Tribalism brings division. If it exists in the society, gradually we hope it will disappear, but certainly it should not exist in our community, within our ranks. I should forget to which tribe I belong or to which tribe my friend belongs. That becomes of a secondary importance, not of primary importance. This, if I'm conscious of it, if I'm thinking of it, then it becomes a form of prejudice. Baha'u'llah has come to abolish all forms of prejudice. White, black, again, tribal prejudice is part of it. So we should try very hard, and I think through prayer and through consciousness, conscious effort, we will be able to overcome this. There is another aspect of unity among the friends, and that is the personal relationships. You know, I think Violette also spoke about I don't like or dislike or things like that. You know, Abdul Baha has given us the formula. The formula is this. He says if somebody has 10 bad qualities and one good one, forgive and forget the 10 bad qualities and look at the good one. Do we do this? When I dislike somebody, it's because I'm focusing on his bad qualities. That's what happens. I start hating him. I start distrusting him. I start becoming suspicious about everything he says and does. This is poison. I'm instilling poison in my own community. That's what I'm doing. I should get rid of this. This is a very bad thing that I'm carrying with me. So I should look at the good things. Abdul Baha gives the example of Christ. They passed by a dead dog. And the disciples, each one said, what a bad smell, what a bad look, and so on. Christ said, wait a minute. Look at the white teeth of this dead dog. See how white and clean are the teeth. He found something that the disciples could not see. And Abdul Baha gives this example. In other words, everybody has some white tooth in his mouth. Look at that. And praise that good quality. This morning, our counselor, Rachel, told us one of the things that the House of Justice urges the Friends to do during the 5-Free Plan is what? To encourage each other. What do we do? Do we always encourage each other? You know, I'm sorry to say this, but I have had a conversation with quite a number of the Friends. I tell them, you know, our duty is to encourage each other. You know what they answer me? One of them said, but you know, Mr. Nakhjavani, you don't know this person. If I encourage him, it will become worse. We say, oh Lord, you are wrong. I know, you don't know. That's what we are saying in essence. We should change the frame of our thinking. See exactly what he's telling us to do. Let's do that. Encouragement. See the good qualities of others, not the faults of others. But when you look at yourself, look at your faults. And don't try to magnify your good qualities. I say, look, see how I am, see how he is or she is. Alhamdulillah, I'm not like her or like him. So we feel that we are so much better, so much higher than the rest. This is also bad. When we look at ourselves, we should look at our faults. That's the time to look at faults. The faults in us, within us. When we look at others, we should look at the good qualities and praise them, encourage them. Someone told me, you know, I encourage others, but you see, no one encourages me. The very fact that I am expecting encouragement from others, friends, is wrong. The very fact that I am expecting it, it is as if I am good, you should praise me, and it is my right that you should praise me. And if you don't praise me, you are breaking my heart. Where do we find such a philosophy in the Baha'i writings? It does not exist. This is my own fabrication. I should not be expecting anything from anybody. I should be a source of encouragement to others. That's what I should do. My sole purpose in life should be to please my Lord. Yes, that's all. He knows it is enough. He sees it is enough. Baha'u'llah goes further. He says, don't expect even benefits in the next world. In other words, someone will say, okay, God, you don't give me anything here, all right, but in the next world, business is business. You should pay me there. God does not like this. I'm telling you, I don't have direct communication with him. But I read his writings. He doesn't like that. What he wants is pure motive. 100% pure love. Without any expectation from either him or others. From nobody. That is true love. That is true faith. Love should be selfless to be true. When love becomes selfish, it is not love. It is selfish desire. That's what it is. This is a big subject, but it's enough, I think, that we have discussed it together. Now, there is one thing. I'm going to meet with your National Spiritual Assembly after this meeting. We're going to meet and have some consultation. I just want to tell you something I'm going to mention to them. The point I want to mention to them is that the level of Baha'i contributions to the Baha'i funds is not adequate. And this level is not healthy as it is now in Kenya. And as there are Baha'is in Uganda, I would like to tell them the same thing. And if there are any from Tanzania, I want to tell them the same thing. Because the same problem exists in all three countries. But my dear friends, Ethiopia is also part of Africa. The Ethiopian Baha'i community, at one point, when the House of Justice sent them a check for the National Fund, they returned the check with deep gratitude by saying, no, we will stand on our own feet. They are just as poor or not poor as you are. They are part of this African economy. We were there, Violette and I were there just a few weeks ago. We met them, we talked to them. They have the same problems, but they have a different attitude towards their fund. It's a different situation. They say we are responsible for our own expenses. We have needs, we tell our community, and the friends gather around us, around the National Assembly, and we go ahead. and they have almost universal participation. It's not only 5 members of a local community or 5 or 30 members of a national community who are paying. No, it's not like that. It is universal participation of each local community. They have succeeded. You ask them, what have they done? They have succeeded. Why have we failed in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania? And this is unhealthy. I'm talking to you very frankly, because I'm going to talk about this today with your National Spiritual Assembly. This community cannot develop if it does not stand on its own feet. We have to re-examine our lives, our activities, as individuals as well as communities. We have to do this because of our love for Baha'u'llah. We have to do this. If we have suggestions, we have to write to the National Assembly. I suggest we do thus and thus. But we have to be able to mobilize the rank and file of the communities in each of these 3 countries. Now, Shoghi Effendi has warned us against materialism in Africa. Now, materialism is something which is the opposite of sacrificing for the fun. Materialism says, try to have more and get more and keep more. That's what materialism does. And Shoghi Effendi, sitting in Haifa and looking into the future about Africa, saw a danger. And he said, materialism is on its way to Africa. Now, there is a lot of material prosperity in Kenya. When I compare Kenya with Uganda and Tanzania, you're way ahead. To that same extent, you have more materialism already in this country. Detachment is the exact opposite of materialism. Detachment makes you aware of the things of the spirit. Detachment makes you responsible to God, makes you aware that you are responsible to God. It makes us aware that this life is not everything, that this life is but a stage in our existence. We still have a 3rd stage ahead of us. The 3rd stage, the embryonic stage, this existence in this world, and the world beyond. These are the 3 stages. And what I do here, the way I live here, what is 70, 80 years, if that? Who knows when his end will come? Nobody. Nobody. Baha'u'llah in the hidden word says, death shall come to thee unheralded, unannounced. No one knows. Supposing we are lucky and we are 70 and 80 and 90 or whatever. So what? This is not eternity. Then we go to the next world, to the 3rd world. We have to answer the Lord for what we have done here. How have we lived here? We have to answer there. He is the true reckoner. He reckons. He keeps accounts. Believe me, the best computer is up there. And we are responsible. We have to answer for our deeds and, God forbid, for our misdeeds. So he has warned us about materialism. He has warned us about another thing for Africa. He has warned us about opposition. He says opposition is definitely coming. The stronger you are, the fiercer will the opposition be. And this opposition is on its way. The stronger you are, you have to be ready. And my dear friends, the reason why the House of Justice has insisted about training institutes is because of this. Training institutes, the institute process, the study circles, this deepening classes and so on. Why are they there at this time? One of the wisdoms is because of opposition. We have to be strong. We have to be firm. You have to know what the faith is all about. If we don't know the faith, we cannot live the Baha'i life. If we don't study the faith, we cannot live the Baha'i life. If we long to be acceptable to him, we should study his words. We should study his teachings, understand his teachings. That's how we get closer to him. Shoghi Effendi, now please cheer up. I'm towards the end of my talk. Shoghi Effendi, in one of his letters, written in his own handwriting, he speaks about this opposition, but he says, what will the opposition result in? What will be the outcome of opposition in Africa? He says, every attack, however launched, whether individually or collectively, against the budding institutions of a slowly rising, majestically unfolding order, is not only doomed to fail, but is bound to bring in its wake a further reinforcement of the numerical strength of the followers of the faith, and a still more notable acceleration in the progress of its expansion and consolidation. This is the result of opposition. He says this opposition will fail. The only result is it's a proclamation of the cause. More people will enter the Baha'i fold, and the process of expansion and consolidation will be strengthened. This is how the Son of God saw. Before he passed away, in 1957, he wrote this, the last year of his life. He saw this was going to happen in Africa. We should be ready for it. You know, I know we all feel that we say, all right, who am I? I'm a little Baha'i here, what can I do, you know? Yes, you are a little Baha'i, it's true. We are all little Baha'is. We are all little dots. And if we look at ourselves, we are weak. It's true. But you know, we read in the writings that God can change an atom into a sun. God can change a drop into an ocean. God can change a gnat. The word gnat is written G-N-A-T, and it means mosquito. He can change a gnat into an eagle. We may think this is an exaggeration. My dear friends, I can assure you This is not an exaggeration. In my own life, I have seen many drops becoming oceans. I have seen mosquitoes becoming eagles under the influence of the cause of Baha'u'llah. What we have to do is to cling to the hem of his robe all the time, to be with him. He will be with us, and he will show us that he is with us. He will confirm us. He will protect us. He will strengthen us. He will guide us, and he will lead us to many high victories under his glorious name. When Violette and I will go back to the Holy Land, you can be sure that in addition to the loving prayers of the Universal House of Justice that you just heard about, that when we go back, we're going to remember you. We're going to remember these meetings here. We're going to remember your shining faces here. And we will be praying for you and for the Kenya Baha'i community and for the National Spiritual Assembly of Kenya and for the counselors laboring in this country and for the auxiliary board members and assistants laboring in this country. We will be praying for the entire Baha'i community of Kenya. You can be sure about that.
May I write to say that time is not a barrier here?
Yes.
Not a barrier.
You know, we are all so filled with emotion. I know it just took my breath away. And I remember an example that my beloved Ruhi Khanum would repeatedly say throughout her trip in Africa. She used to tell the friends at the beginning of the rainy season, first very big drops come down. One drop here, and one drop there, and one drop there. And then gradually it will speed up and becomes faster and faster until it becomes a deluge. As these dear friends came up the stage, I could see this example of Ruhi Khanum taking life. I saw the drops that had become rivers, and looking back at you, I can see the deluge in Kenya. She is so very much part of Africa. She is the spirit behind Africa campaign. And I think she's very much alive with us. I have brought a gift for the National Assembly, which I'll give to Mr. Sam Ebura. It is a little book I have written as a tribute to our amateur Baha'i Yaqeen. You know the story of Ruhi Khanum's safari. Eventually, after almost 26, 25 years, I was able to complete in a book form. And the last 2.5 years of Ruhi Khanum's life, when she was not able anymore to travel, and I was at home, I was able to finish this book. And 2 months before she passed away, I started bringing chapter by chapter and read it to her every day. And it caused her so much joy, so much happiness. At times she felt she is back in Africa. Sometimes in the middle of it, she would tell me, "Oh, Violet, are we ready to go? Is the car ready to go back?" She really, I think she left this world from Africa. Just before we left Haifa, George Ronald sent these flyers of the book. I'll put it here, and then you can maybe see, and when it's out, you can get it. Because every chapter of this book belongs to one of the countries, the 34 countries that she visited in a course of 3 years, 8 months, and 11 days. Before I tell you the story of Africa, as I was getting my papers, I came across this prayer that I had found, and I thought, although it's the prayer of Africa, of Abdul Baha, and it was written many, many years before, I think it fits the life of Amatul Baha Ruhi Khanum so perfectly. O thou who art host to the beloved of the Lord, blessed art thou for arising to serve his loved ones. Blessed art thou for opening the doors of Mashriq al-Askar. Blessed art thou for gladdening the hearts of his companions. Blessed art thou for dilating the souls of his intimate friends. Blessed art thou for being the bond slave among his people. Blessed art thou for having assumed those tasks and discharged those duties that are mine. Blessed art thou for adorning thyself with my crown, for serving the lovers of Abdul Baha, for serving the lovers of Abha beauty in the spirit of true servitude. Abdul Baha Abbas. I think every line of this applies to Amatul Baha Ruhi Khanum. Her name, Amatul Baha, was the feminine of Abdul Baha, the maid servant of Baha. The story of tour of Africa began very early. When Ruhi Khanum first came to the 1958 conference in Kampala, she was able to spend one night in the village of Opot in Teso, in the home of Mr. Oloro Epiero. And she promised from then on that one day she will come back to Africa. And this was only possible in 1969, when she had just completed her book, The Priceless Pearl. And she felt that she has now done her most important duty to the beloved guardian, and she was free to come to Africa. She spent 10 days, the first 10 days of her arrival in Kampala, on a private visit. And then the tour began really from Kenya. Here on the 19th of August 1969, she took charge of her car, the Land Rover. Yesterday, the friends took me to see this Land Rover in the Baha'i Center here. It brought back so many memories. Memories of joy, because she often said that she had her greatest joy after the passing of Shoghi Effendi on those almost 4 years that she traveled through Africa. She bought this Land Rover because she felt that that's the only way that she can reach the friends in the villages. She did not want to fly from capital to capital and just be able to go one night to a village and back. So the African safari began in Kenya. I'm not going to tell you the story of this book because I think you would like to read it. It's in 600 pages that I have written, with photographs from almost every part of Africa. The first part was in the coastal area of Kenya, and then from there she went to Tanzania. This Nairobi was the hub of the African safari. I was trying to count how many times we came in and out of Nairobi during that time. I reached 9, maybe it's more. Every time that she went out, she would come back to Nairobi to start another part of her trip. So after Tanzania, she came back again to Kenya for a few days, and then she went for a month to Ethiopia. Then she came back again to Nairobi. Now, when she came back from Tanzania, we were a few days in Nairobi, and one of the friends who was very keen on agriculture invited Ruhi Khanum, asked her, she said, there is a fair, agricultural fair in Nairobi. Are you interested to see it? Well, Ruhi Khanum was interested practically in everything. She used to say once, she said to Shoghi Effendi, oh, I am so interested in such and such. Shoghi Effendi looked at her and said, what you aren't interested in, tell me that. It is really true. She had interest practically in everything in life. So she went to this agricultural show. For this first 2 months of ownership of her car, she often thought, what can I call my car? She used to say, it is so square and so fat, I cannot give it a feminine name. What can I call my car? She called everything that she owned by a name. She believed that every object needed to have a name. So she went to that agricultural show, and she saw this very beautiful prize-winning cow with a plaque in front of it, and the name was Regent's Answer. She said, I know what I'll call my car. It is Mary's Answer. And this was, she said, an answer to a lifetime prayer. It was the first car, she said, that she owned. She said all the cars that she had had in her life either belonged to her father or to Shoghi Effendi. But this one was her own car. So it was Mary's Answer. The second part of her trip in Kenya was when she enjoyed so much. She had never been to the highlands of Kenya. So when we left Nairobi and we went to Naivasha and Gilgil and all this gorgeous area that you have, she just thoroughly enjoyed it. She thought that she could live in these highlands. They are so beautiful. And then she did a tour of the Western Province. That was where she stayed in Kisumu in the home of Sam and Esther, and we had such a wonderful time with them. She visited for the second time home of Lois, Chief Isaiah's wife. She had been in that house in earlier years, and she called their first son Rabbani. And in this time, in 1969, when she was in the home of Lois, she had her little girl, and she wanted a name, and they called her Ruhia. So they have the first and the last in their home. Actually, I have a whole collection of the little Ruhias throughout Africa in the arms of Ruhi Khanum. From Kenya, we went to Uganda for a month of rest that Ruhi Khanum needed badly. And this was really a highlight of my own life, because Ruhi Khanum was a guest in the home of my parents. It was the period that my father was bedridden, he could not move, and that for this 1 month there was so much joy in that house. Every morning she used to get up and go to see my father in bed. My mother used to shave my father every other day. During this 1 month, he insisted that she should shave him every day because Ruhi Khanum would go and greet him every morning and kiss him. And he said, how can I have an unshaved face offered to Ruhi Khanum? It was a very joyous period that he had in Uganda. Although it was supposed to be rest and no programs, but it was filled with programs. There were many activities during that month. One of the most wonderful things that happened there was when dear Enoch Olinga came to Kampala. He was going to send his children to Panchgani school to India. So he came over to say goodbye, the children to say goodbye to Ruhi Khanum. And it was so adorable. They were all there. Ruhi Khanum said, Enoch, introduce them to me. So Enoch went on giving the name Grace and Chris and this and that, and then got to the last 2 boys, and he couldn't make which was which. So he looked at one, he said, well, who are you? He said, I'm Lenny. So Lenny and Patrick were mixed together. It was so adorable. The last visit to the temple, when Enoch also was in Kampala, it was memorable. The rest of the trip throughout Africa, the first 2 months of it, which we were going through Zaire, the Congo, and everybody was so scared for Khanum. They said, don't go, it is very dangerous. They had just been through their civil war. And you know, Ruhi Khanum had a really adventurous spirit. She was a very courageous person. She was not foolhardy. I never knew Khanum taking risks. But it was enough to tell Ruhi Khanum that this is dangerous. She wanted to try it. So when everybody said, don't go to Zaire, she said, well, I have an American passport. I'll go to the American embassy and find out if I could go through Zaire. In American embassy, she was told, no, you must not go. We have forbidden all our subjects to go through Zaire. It's dangerous. She didn't like it. She came out and she said, all Americans are sissies. So she looked across the road and there was the Israeli embassy. She said, let's go there. We went to the Israeli embassy, and you know, Israelis are very tough people. And there was this tough ambassador, I never forget him. When he heard about this, he turned to Ruhi Khanum and said, what are you afraid of? He said, I've just sent 2 young men, 2 Israelis. They've just crossed Zaire. It's perfectly all right. You can go. He said, what you can do, wherever you get to a post office, send me a cable. So if I don't get any news from you, I know where you are lost, you know, the last place. He had no idea that there were no post office working, so we could not send any cable until we had crossed and gone out of Zaire. However, this encouraged Ruhi Khanum, but she invited Mr. Oloro to go with us. Said, it's good to have a man with us. So Mr. Oloro traveled the first 2 months of that trip with us through the Congo, through Central African Republic, and through Chad. And then he said goodbye and went back, and we continued alone all through. There were many exciting incidents that you will read in the book, some of them frightening, some of them funny. But we went through right to the very west of the African continent. And then we came back. We could not come back the same way. We had to put the car on a boat and come the section that was no more open because of the rainy season. And then we toured the whole of Zaire, the heart of the Congo, through the Kasai provinces, both oriental and occidental, and went down south of Zaire into Zambia, right down to South Africa and to Mozambique, And then we found out we could not go and visit Malawi because of the war between Mozambique and all that area. No car could go. So we put the car again in a boat and came to Mombasa and back to Nairobi and left the car here, and we flew to Malawi and visited Malawi and then came back. But the joy of it is when she finished, when you think of it, after 3 years and 8 months, when she had finished, when both of us were really physically broken. It was not a joke, it was a very heavy-going physical trip. When it was all finished and we were in Nairobi and we were packing up and we were planning to leave, one day in the hotel, in the morning we were having breakfast, she looked at me, she said, "Violet, I don't know about you, but I cannot bear to leave Africa. I want to have one more trip." And we got into the car and we drove 500 miles to what is it, Samburas, the Lake Rudolph, and 500 miles back. She said, "I want to fill my soul with Africa." And that was the last part of Africa that she visited. I put some of the highlights of this trip to tell you, some of the things that I think is worth thinking about, because it was the effort of Ruhi Khanum and the reason for these efforts that she made. First of all, the reason she made this trip, and often she would tell the friends, especially younger people, she used to say, "Well, I don't know what's happened to you young people. Where is the spirit of adventure in you? Me, in my old age, I have it more than you young people have it." She used to tell to the ladies and say, "Look, I am in my 60s. I am elderly, but I still get up and go." And her whole effort was to make people say, if she can do it, maybe I can do it too. And I think many did. I remember when we were in Ethiopia, and particularly in Asmara, in Eritrea, there was such a spirit of harmony and love amongst the pioneers and the local believers. There was such a love, I have never seen it anywhere else. She was 5 days in Asmara, and I think she gave 5 of her finest talks in Africa there. She was so inspired, she just glowed, and her talks were fantastic. Some of these I have put in my book because they are such beautiful talks. When we came out of Ethiopia, she often thought and said, "I wonder what it was in that country that brought the best out of me." And then she came to the conclusion that what inspired her in Ethiopia, and particularly in Asmara, was this harmony in the community, this love and unity of the friends that affected her and brought the best out of her. She had a complete reverse of it in another country in Africa, which was a small, very small community with 2 dear families, pioneers there, who did not like each other. And it wasn't just that not like each other, they really disliked each other. And every time one of them was with Ruhi Khanum, somehow they would start talking something about the other one. We were 3 days in that town, and Ruhi Khanum went to bed with a high fever, and there was nothing wrong with her physically. She just went to bed with fever. And she came to the conclusion that this was the effect of the inharmony amongst the friends. And she often cited this. And she said, inharmony is a disease not a psychological disease, it's a physical disease. Said if you look at the body, your own body, we are healthy when there is harmony within our own body. The moment there is something wrong, this harmony is disturbed, the body gets sick. And she believed very strongly, and she often mentioned it, that don't think that if you are in the daggers, whatever you say, edge with each other, that it's just between you and a friend. It is not. The effect of it would be on the community. The effect of it sometimes go as far as the whole country. And that this was a lesson that really we all learned from her. She believed that love is like a fountain. He said the more you open the faucet, the more water will come out. You cannot limit your love, because love is limitless. You open your heart to everybody, and you will find that you can take even people that are quite different from you and you have disliked them in the first place. You can take them into your heart because you have opened the doors wide open. I remember once, this is many years ago, in her first trip in India, she was in a city where there was a Baha'i, one of the old Baha'is, who was a very distinguished Baha'i, a very wonderful Baha'i. But boy, oh boy, that man was just full of complaint about everybody. And it went on and on, talking against this one and this situation and that situation, until Ruhi Khanum really lost her temper with him. And this man became very impolite, you know, because Ruhi Khanum told him off, said this is not a Baha'i spirit, that you have to pull yourself together, you cannot talk about your own fellow Baha'is in this way. And this man didn't like it and was a bit impolite. And I remember I got so angry that I had to leave. We were at the dining table, because I thought if I sit there, I'm going to be even more impolite than him, and I'll say something to him. So I left. And when Ruhi Khanum, we went to room, she was seething with anger about this man and his character and so on. And we had a lot of prayers that night. The next morning she told me something that it just shows Ruhi Khanum. She said, you know, last night I was so angry. And I said to myself, I cannot love this man. And I heard the voice of my own conscience telling me, how? How is it that you cannot love him? He is a Baha'i. He loves Baha'u'llah. And I said, no, you know, he's doing this, he says that, he says the other thing. And he said, my voice told me, you are a hand of the cause. You have lived 20 years with Shoghi Effendi. You are a Baha'i. How can you not love him just because he has been rude? So she said, half the night I turned around in my bed, I said no, and the sound of my conscience said, yes, you can. Back and forth. And she said, it was before the dawn came that I decided, yes, I can. She said, I opened the gates of my heart and I got this man back where he was before. And he said, I had a good sleep, and the next morning I found that I really liked him. He had many wonderful qualities. Now, this was kind of, she was a very, I cannot say she was a simple person, because she was not. She was a very sophisticated human being. She was a very deep thinker. She was an intellectual. But somehow, in her relationship of her soul with Baha'u'llah, there was a simplicity that was like a child. It was so beautiful. She was the most uncomplicated human being I have ever met. She would solve her own problems very simply. She would often go back. When she had a problem, I had always noticed, because when Ruhi Khanum would start talking about her childhood, about her mother, I always knew there is something that is bothering her, because she would go back and remember her own mother, how her mother would have done it. She used to say, everything I have learned in life, I have either learned it from my mother or from Shoghi Effendi. Sometimes she would say, I wonder if I have anything of my own. She had plenty. She had that receptive, magnetic soul that took in all the goodness that came around her. Of the interesting things that happened on this trip, which I loved, I must tell you, one of the habits of Ruhi Khanum was that wherever she went to a place where there is a house of worship, whether it was a church, whether it was a mosque, whether it was a temple, she always went and visited, especially if architecturally they were interesting, because that was her main interest. I remember we were going on our way in Mali, we were going on our way to Timbuktu. And we drove quite most of it. The last part we couldn't. When we got to the edge of the Sahara, we couldn't. But most of it we drove because she wanted to see these fabulous mosques of Mali, which are famous. Many beautiful books are written about this. And so we arrived in this little town of Genève, and we wanted to go to the mosque. The mosque was midday, and the mosque was locked up. There was a man, a caretaker there. He said, the house of Imam is over there. You can go and ask him to open the mosque for you. We went to the house of this Imam. He was lying down. He was a middle-aged man. And he was very sweet. It was something happened there which was very interesting too, because as we went in, he was lying down. He had, at his bedside, he had a little table. And on it was a booklet in Arabic. And it had the first verse of the Quran, the opening surah of the Quran there, and some of the other surahs. So I picked this up and I started reading it loud. This man jumped out of his bed. He listened to me. He said, read it again. So I started reading it again. He said, wait. He ran out of his house and he yelled, and everybody came out of other houses, and he called particularly the women. He called them all to come, and when they were all gathered, he looked at me, he said, read it again. So I read it again, and then he told something. It was so touching. He turned to the people, he said, now you see, I was reading it correctly. You see, nobody else could read it. And probably he thought that they didn't believe what he was reading from the Quran. So when I read it, it proved that he knew what he was reading. So he immediately got up and he said, he opened the door of the mosque for Khanum to go in. And I remember she went in and went very close to the mihrab, and she knelt down and she prostrated herself. And the floor, this was a poor place. There was no rugs on the floor of this mosque. It was just fine dust, fine sand. She prostrated on this sand and had prayers. And this Imam just was ready to jump out of his own body. He had never seen a white woman so distinguished, so beautiful, come to his mosque and to pray the way they did, to prostrate and to pray. Sometimes when she prayed in the churches, some of the Baha'is would be surprised. Once she went to a temple, a Buddhist temple, to pray. I remember this lady who was very distinguished. She was very upset. She told me, you see, we are trying to get our Baha'is to win away from their past. Now Ruhi Khanum goes into a temple and pray. What would they say? They think that it's okay to pray in the temple. So I realized she was disturbed. When Khanum came out, I told her. I said, look, Khanum, this is the problem. Could you please explain to her? Ruhi Khanum turned to this woman and said, what did you think I was praying for in there? She said, I don't know. She said, I was praying to Buddha. I was begging him that he would come to his own people, to direct them, to show them the light, to let them see Baha'u'llah as his own return. So in every church she went, she did that. In every mosque she went, her prayer was for the guidance to come from Muhammad, from Jesus, from Buddha, from whoever, to the people of the country and guide them. She had a nature of tolerance that it is unequaled. You could never really shock Ruhi Khanum in the sense of, saying, oh, do you know Swan? She always was able to look at the other person's point of view, which was a quality very rare. Ali tells me I have 5 minutes now. I have to think which is the most important thing to say in the 5 minutes. This tour of Africa was the joy of her life, as I said. It came at a time when she was tired. The period of the ministry of the hands had finished. She had the House of Justice was sailing, and her heart was at rest. And she had written the biography of Shoghi Effendi, and she came to Africa. And she took from this continent such joy that I think forever you will be proud that you are part of the continent who gave so much joy to her heart. And I know she is with us today. I have felt her very strongly here, and I'm sure many of you who knew her personally and had her in your homes, you have been host and hostess to her in different parts of Africa. You must feel the same. Thank you.
Mr. Nakhjavani, karibu.
Thank you very much. I can't tell you what a joy it is for me and my wife to be here in Kenya. The first time we visited Kenya was in 1951. On the 1st of August 1951, we were in Kisumu, and I think that was probably the first Baha'i meeting ever to be held in this beloved country. I don't know how many of you were living at that time, but it has been a wonderful experience for us to be in Kenya, and also when we went to Uganda and settled there. And after settling there, we visited Kenya many, many times, in addition to the extensive travels, of course, that my wife had many years later. And so I really, coming to Kenya and to Uganda, and in 2 days we'll be going to Dar es Salaam, it's like coming back home. We haven't been here, I haven't been here for 40 years. My wife, I think, some 38 years. So it is really a homecoming for us, and very excited about it. The question of the purpose of our gathering tonight is for those of you who are friends of the Baha'is, to share with us our joy. And we thank you very much for coming, because we derive inspiration when we see that you feel with us, that you share this great excitement that we have about these days. The central theme of the Baha'i faith, as you know, And as it was expressed in this prayer that was read, in the prayer, I think the words are, let the religions agree, O God, and make the nations one. That's basically the central theme of the Baha'i faith. And Baha'u'llah, the founder of our faith, gives us a wonderful concept or vision about how humanity is moving, where it is moving. He tells us that humanity is approaching its maturity, that we are approaching the stage of maturity collectively as a human family. Now, this is a wonderful concept, and Baha'is have written volumes and volumes, articles, books, to show that this is indeed the case, that there are signs, that there are evidences in the social life of man, in the political life of man. I was very glad to hear that there are representatives of UN agencies here. The very existence of United Nations was inconceivable even in the days of Baha'u'llah himself. These things have happened during this 20th century, which has just elapsed. The League of Nations, when it was first formed, I remember my own days at the university when I was talking about unity, peace. My own fellow students would laugh at me. What are you talking about? Peace for the world? This is impossible. This was in my own lifetime, when I was, let's say, 20 years old. That's how the world was at the beginning of this century, my very dear friends. The world has changed. We had the League of Nations. It collapsed. But we now have the United Nations. It needs to be strengthened. It has united agencies. Look what has happened with, of course, I don't say that the United Nations in its present form is the ideal institution for the world, or that it is a world government. It's not. But it doesn't mean that we are not moving towards that goal. That seems to be the goal for humanity. It seems there are certain forces which are compelling man to move towards this goal. And this is what Baha'u'llah saw. This is what he felt. 130 years ago, he wrote about it in his writings. And he called on the people of the world to unite. Not only the people of the world, but the religions. He wanted the religions to agree. He wanted the leaders of religions to set aside their internal differences, their ritual. I'll just read you a few words from the writings of Baha'u'llah. The tabernacle of unity has been raised. Regard ye not one another as strangers. Of one tree are ye all the fruit. Of one bough the leaves. The world is but one country, and mankind its citizens. Let not a man glory in this, that he loves his country. Let him rather glory in this, that he loves his kind. Baha'u'llah in his writing says, he calls upon us as thinking people, as responsible citizens of the world. He calls upon us to regard the world as man's body. He says that the human temple is a perfect example of what humanity is. It is one body, one organism, one entity. I will read you the words that he has written on this subject. Regard the world as man's body, which is afflicted with diverse ailments, and the recovery of which dependeth upon the harmonizing of all of its component elements. The all-knowing physician hath his finger on the pulse of mankind. He perceiveth the disease and prescribeth in his unerring wisdom the remedy. Now, the writings of Baha'u'llah show that we are all related to each other, to one another. We are all organs, members, cells, if you like, of this body. Each one of us has a part to play. That we are all really united, organically united. And we have to, if we think about it, we really have to accept this. This is how the world has become one big village, as we say. We are just one family. Now, when it comes to, as we are in Africa, I must say this, although it's not exactly related to the subject of the unity of religions and unity of mankind, but I think it's a very important point, because we are in Africa. Baha'u'llah likens the black race to the pupil of the eye, which is black. And it is this pupil of the eye that sees, that perceives. And he saw in the black race this capacity to see the truth. He saw in the black race a spiritual receptivity that he did not see in other races. The eye, through the pupil, sees and also reflects the inner spirit which is in man. You look at the face and you look at the eyes and you say, this is a kind person, or this is an unkind person, or this is a loving person, or this is a very generous person, or this is a humble person. You see, the eye transmits what is in the spirit, man's spirit. Now, for Baha'u'llah, 100 years ago, 130 years ago, to say this, to give the example of the body, and then to pick on the pupil of the eye for the black race, is something of extreme importance to us. This is something that the Baha'is all over the world accept. They take it because it is from the founder of our faith. That's how we take it, that's how we accept it. And furthermore, in further elucidating this principle, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, who was the head of the faith, who was the husband of Amatul Baha, Madame Rabbani, who traveled throughout Africa for 4 years, and Violette had the great privilege of accompanying her. Now, the husband of Madame Rabbani wrote, and he was the head of our faith, and he was commenting on this statement of Baha'u'llah about the pupil of God. And he wrote that Africa has a great contribution to make to world civilization. From this small podium, I am calling on those of us who are from the black race, from the African race, to realize who you are and what role you have to play, you can play, you are destined to play in the social evolution of humanity. You have such a role. Accept it and perform it, because that will be well pleasing in the eyes of Allah. Now, the question of how can religions agree? It is easy to maybe understand that there is one God. It is easy to understand that humanity is one. But it's a little bit difficult to accept how can religions really agree? How can religions become one? Baha'u'llah explains, and I know we are all tired standing, some of us are sitting, but just be patient with me, it won't be very long. Baha'u'llah explains it in this way. He says, if you look at the teachings of every religion, you find that it consists of two parts. One part is essentially spiritual and moral and character. It has to do with the existence of God, it has to do with prayer, it has to do with our duties towards God, our accountability to Him. It has to do with the soul, it has to do with the immortality of the soul, it has to do with heaven, it has to do with punishment, it has to do with reward in the next world. So this aspect of religion is the essential part, Baha'u'llah explains to us. Then there is the second part of religion that has to do with human affairs. It has to do, let us say, with the form of marriage, or divorce, or inheritance, or such matters of personal status. It has to do with certain laws of society. All right, these things change because conditions have changed. And as Baha'u'llah says, ailments have changed. See, remedies have to change also. So that is where the difference is. The difference are in the social laws. Conditions change, therefore laws have changed. Here on this side, which is eternal truths, they are eternal for all time. And they are the same. And this is the fundamental part of religion. This is why he says that religions are one. And they should become one. Leaders of religion should be able to get together. They should be able to set aside all these formulas about forms and about rituals, as I said, and formalities. Leave those aside and let's look at the essence of religion. That's where we will be united. We'll get together. We'll be able to work together for the welfare of humanity, for peace, for brotherhood, for the abolition of prejudice. So these are some of the essential aspects of humanity, of the teachings of Baha'u'llah. Now, there are a few other things that Baha'u'llah writes about in his writings. The other promise that he has given us in his writings, and this is a wonderful thing, and as Baha'is we believe it will happen, is that eventually religion and science will agree. He says that true religion, which is that essential part, and science, when it matures, because it has not matured, will eventually work together as two potent forces at the disposal of mankind. This is the promise he gives us. If you look at science today, science has wonderful things to provide us. Modernization that we have in the world today is because of science. No question about that. Science is based on truth. Religion is basically based on truth. How can two forces who are both seeking truth, who are both lovers of truth, ever disagree? They should not, cannot disagree. But there are limitations. There are certain things in religion that show that religion needs science. And there are certain things in science which show that science needs religion. The two must work hand in hand. There are limitations. For example, take science. Take a drop of tears. A scientist will take that drop of tears and take it and analyze it for you in a laboratory and tell you exactly what the constituent elements of that drop of tears are. But scientists cannot say whether that drop of tears has been caused by joy or by sorrow. You cannot do that. It's not within its province. Intellectually, science can prove that all humanity is one. But that same scientist, my dear friends, who can prove to you that scientifically, still has racial prejudice. He cannot overcome his emotions because he was brought up in a family that put this idea of racial prejudice in his mind, in his heart, in his thinking. It requires another force, which is religious force, the force of faith. For the founder of a faith to come on behalf of God and telling you you should not have racial prejudice, that will clean that prejudice, that will wash away that prejudice from the heart of the people. But science cannot do that. Science cannot bring the hearts together. It can bring the minds together, but not the hearts. If someone dies in a family and we want to comfort that family for the death of this dear one, science cannot produce any consolation, any comfort to the bereaved. These are the limits of science. Science is not everything. Science and religion should go hand in hand. Now, there are other teachings of Baha'u'llah about equality of men and women. This is a big subject. I can't even start discussing it with you. And there is the question of the future world commonwealth of nations and the description that we find in the writings of Baha'u'llah about how this commonwealth of nations can come about. These are things that we need special study, special discussion, and I'm afraid that it's outside the scope of our meeting tonight. Thank you for coming to us. We love you all, and we hope that Kenya and the Baha'i community in Kenya will be able to serve the people of Kenya in a way acceptable in his sight.